Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, December the 18th, 2024. Today there is a square aspect between the Sun and Neptune, and this is something I want to consider. I want to consider what it means to have a Sun square Neptune in your chart, and I will be looking at some examples, and I'll also be looking at some examples of Sun square Neptune events where there was a Sun square Neptune, where perhaps the event was related to this aspect, and this might just give us a general idea about what this aspect means. But before I look at Sun square Neptune, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, December the 18th, 2024. As always, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed and you enjoy this video, I'd be really happy to have you as a subscriber. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, but it does make a difference to my channel. Anyway, let's have a look at what's happening today. So top right, that is a picture of the sinking of the Titanic, and the Titanic did sink while the Sun was square Neptune, and that's one of the events I will be considering. And so as far as the astrology of today is concerned, I suppose the main thing to point out is that the moon is most certainly in Leo. So the moon is at 9 degrees Leo at noon on December the 18th, 2024, New York time. And so moon in Leo, well, it's different from a moon in Cancer. We have had moon in Cancer over the last couple of days. Moon in Cancer was in a water sign, and it was perhaps relatively emotional, perhaps focused on security, and not just security, memories. Cancer is a sign is often connected with the memory. And moon in Leo, well, one thing about the moon in Leo, when the moon moves from Cancer to Leo, it does weaken, because the moon is not entirely happy in Leo. I mean, it's not in its detriment and fall in Leo, but the moon has no dignity in Leo. And I mean, kind of that makes sense, because the Sun and the moon, the Sun rules Leo, the moon rules Cancer, and the Sun and the moon represent two very opposite principles, a male and a female, positive and negative, yin and yang. And so the moon, when it's in Leo, it's just too much. The moon is a watery planet. It's a fairly sensitive planet, so it's a bit of a burnout for poor moon in Leo. Now, that's not the same for every fire sign. Although the moon is not exalted or in its own sign in Sagittarius, the moon in Sagittarius actually works quite well traditionally. And William Lilly in Christian Astrology says that points this out when talking about the moon. But moon in Leo, it can be a little bit overwhelmed here. But still, with moon in Leo, we do want attention, even if we're not getting this attention. It's kind of like Sun in Leo, just except it's more fragile, moon in Leo. So Sun in Leo demands attention. Moon in Leo would like attention. There's a sort of a difference there. And so the moon, I suppose we can say the moon is in a fire sign, and we've got Mercury in Sagittarius, we've got Sun in Sagittarius. Sun is still in Sagittarius. I suppose it's drifting towards the solstice, drifting towards Capricorn. But with three personal planets in fire signs, it's quite a fiery day, and there's perhaps a desire for action, and we want things to happen, and there's no reason for it to be a boring day. And with those three planets in fire signs, sorry, did I say three? In fact, we've got 4 planets in fire signs. What am I saying? Sorry, 4 planets. In fact, 4 of the 5 personal planets are in fire signs. If you take Sun, Mercury, Venus and Mars as the personal planets, those 4 are in fire signs. Of course, Venus is in Aquarius. So yeah, it is a really fiery day. And because it's a fiery day, it's a good day for making connections. Fire is about intuition. It's about just seeing the connections and in an instant knowing what to do, knowing what the situation is. So that's certainly useful, having the moon in Leo. Now, the moon does make a few aspects in Leo. It is making an opposition to Pluto. So as the moment the moon moved into Leo, made that opposition to Pluto. And moon opposition Pluto. You know, I do regard Pluto in Aquarius as Aquarius is in some respects the anti-Leo. So the moon in Leo represents the need to be ourselves. And Pluto may represent sort of dramatic forces which are perhaps questioning our individuality. Maybe there are things beyond us that we can't entirely cope with, that are questioning whether us as individual actors can really make any difference. And then the moon makes a conjunction to Mars. So moon conjunct Mars is quite angry, it's quite proud, and it wants to get attention. It demands to get attention. It demands attention. Now I said that Sun in Leo demands attention. Moon in Leo wants attention. But this is Moon in Leo, but with conjunct Mars. So there may be something of a Sun in Leo feel to it. But Moon conjunct Mars can be angry, and it can represent angry people, and it may represent us getting angry. We feel that we really do have to stand up for our rights, and if something isn't working, you know, we want to say something about it, and speak we can, because the moon is making a trine aspect to Mercury. So it's always good, moon trine Mercury, because moon and Mercury are the communication planets. The moon represents emotional communication. Mercury represents more sort of mental communication, perhaps intellectual communication. So when they're in trine, there really shouldn't be a problem expressing whatever it is that we do need to express. Though we could say that the most important aspect today is the Sun square Neptune. So the Sun 2716 Sagittarius square Neptune at 2710 Pisces. So Sun square Neptune is a little bit confusing, because the Sun represents who we are. It's who we positively are. Sun in Sagittarius. But then Neptune represents perhaps who we're not. And it represents collective forces. So we're trying hard to present ourselves as individuals, as dynamic individuals, but something may be undermining us. So we need to be a little bit sensitive here, and we need to sort of understand what might be representing a confusing influence, and not feel that we've got all the answers, and not feel that things are going to be straightforward. And the clearer we are, the more dynamic we feel, perhaps the more that Neptune could manifest, almost like when we're not quite expecting it. But I will be looking at Sun square Neptune in detail at the end of the video. So we've got Moon 9 degrees Leo in New York. Just quickly look at the horoscope for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australia and New Zealand. And you can see Sydney, at the Sydney time at noon, the moon is at 0 degrees 45 Leo. So if you're in Australia, and especially New Zealand, the beginning of the day, the moon will still be in Cancer. And so I suppose the moon will be trine Neptune, and it might not be a day that starts off on a very sort of dynamic note, and the day takes a bit of time to develop. But by the early afternoon, I think I think that 2 hour time to time. I think that in New Zealand, I may be wrong on this, but I think that the moon would go into Leo just after noon if you're in New Zealand, I think. But anyway, the first half of the day, the moon might well be in Cancer. And so it might not be until around lunchtime that the day really takes off. So there is a little bit of a difference between Australia and New Zealand and, say, the Americas, and particularly in Americas and the rest of the world. So let's now just briefly consider the heliocentric picture. So here is the heliocentric picture. I'm not sure what there is to report. I suppose I should have checked it beforehand. But from a heliocentric perspective, we have Mercury is in Leo at 28 Leo. Mercury is quincunx Neptune. It's not maybe a massively important aspect, but with Mercury quincunx Neptune, maybe it's giving us a similar message to that Sun square Neptune geocentrically, but with Mercury quincunx Neptune, there may be a feeling that it's not entirely easy to express ourselves exactly as we want to express ourselves. The words come out, but they might come out wrong. But as it's a heliocentric picture, it may be more about society and how news is interpreted around the world. It may not be so much about individuals. And Venus, heliocentrically, is moving into Taurus. And I don't worry too much about what the signs mean heliocentrically. Maybe I should. I haven't really given it a great deal of thought. But Venus in Taurus is making a square to Pluto. So Venus square Pluto, that might be about a certain struggle for interpersonal power, who's in control, and relationships, I suppose, might have a certain intensity to them with Venus square Pluto. Certainly would be the case if it was a geocentric chart, but this is a heliocentric chart, and I suppose with it being a heliocentric chart, I suppose this might be about people concerned about image and popularity, nations, governments, companies even trying to manage how people look at them and trying to do whatever they can to boost their popularity, but that can be difficult. So that's a heliocentric picture. I wouldn't have said that there was a great deal to report. And now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, December the 18th, 2024. Aries. Aries, the moon is out of Cancer now, and it's moving into Leo. And I think that is something that is fairly welcome in general, because the moon in Cancer may have not felt entirely natural to you. I mean, I know that there are important things you had to do while the moon was in Cancer, and hopefully at some level you were able to sort of ground yourself, but it was a little bit boring, and you may have felt that you just couldn't do all the things that you were planning on doing. But now, with the moon moving into Leo, I think that you're feeling a lot more dynamic, and this is especially the case given the fact that as the moon moves into Leo, it makes a conjunction to Mars. So with moon conjunct Mars, you can certainly make things happen. And if there's something you've been wanting to do, then now you can do it. And that especially is the case if it's something you want to do that is enjoyable. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you wanted to watch a film or go to the cinema, or I don't know, do something more energetic. I don't know, some kind of exercise. I don't know, whatever you're into, skating, skiing, swimming, some form of exercise that you might want to do. I was swimming, I don't know, remember there's a Sun square Neptune. I'm not sure if activities connected with the water are such a good idea with Sun square Neptune, and I suppose Sun square Neptune, even without the water, it can be a little bit dangerous. As we'll see when we look at some examples of Sun square Neptune, particularly Sun square Neptune events. Things can just happen when the Sun is square Neptune, but still, it may be something. There may be something you want to do that is entertaining, and it might be something that is fun and is harmless, and you just feel that you're just doing something that is really appealing, and you don't have to apologize for it. So I would have said that you should prioritize entertainment and having fun. I would have said with Moon conjunct Mars, but Moon conjunct Mars can be too much of a good thing. It can be quite an angry conjunction. And remember, Mars represents you. Moon can represent your feelings and how your feelings can move from one thing to another. You might just go, it's not even your feelings, it's more your passions, but what you're passionate about, what you get angry about, what you want to tell the world about. And that's especially the case given that Mercury is in Sagittarius and the Moon is making a trine to Mercury, and in fact Mercury is kind of making a trine to Mars, and so there is a lot you want to say, and you want to speak with passion, and it's not just about expressing what you feel, it's perhaps about understanding what's happening in the world around you. And I think part of you would quite like a reaction. And maybe that might be part of your underlying motivation. If nothing is happening, you want to create something. You maybe want to create something out of nothing. And so if you get a reaction, then it shows you that you exist. It also shows that other people exist. And so perhaps there's something a little bit provocative about you, Aries. Provocative in actually quite a playful way. This can be an Aries feature. Some Aries do like to stir things up. They don't mean any harm. I mean, Aries is a fast sign. All things being equal, Aries is not a sign that has grudges. I mean, Aries can demonstrate a lot of anger, but very often that anger just calms down. And yeah, sometimes the purpose of anger or the appearance of anger is to just get people to respond. Sometimes other people can be so lethargic and you have to do something to stir them up. And you're doing it actually in a very playful way. Will your playfulness always be appreciated? Well, possibly not. So I suppose if you want to play tricks on people, I suppose you have to choose your targets well, because I suppose there's a possibility that you can make other people angry. I mean, that really is possible with that Moon conjunct Mars. And other people might not fully understand you, but you kind of know what you need to do. And yeah, you are impulsive, and you can do something without thinking, and then you have to deal with the consequences. I mean, you try to laugh them off, and people who are your kind of people will appreciate your sense of humour, but maybe not everyone will. So I should just say that a little bit of discernment might actually be a good idea. Taurus, you don't want to do too much today. I think you might be quite stubborn. You know what you want, you know what you don't want, and that's the way it is. And so you may be tempted to focus, all your energies onto sort of one thing, onto one place, and you may not actually be particularly curious. I mean, why should you be curious? You understand the world, at least for the moment. You understand the world. You know where you feel comfortable, and that's the way it should be. The problem is, Taurus, that there may be some danger that you put all your energy into one thing, and because of that, it just gets to be all too much, and it might be too intense, and you might just find yourself getting angry. Perhaps something is going to bother you, and it'll keep bothering you, and you'll think about it, and you won't be able to get sort of different perspective. And at a certain stage, there might be some kind of explosion. So there is actually something a little bit explosive about today, and there are definitely things you want to happen, and there are things you don't want to happen, and you're stubborn, and you can be too stubborn. And so what we perhaps need today is some kind of pressure release. And so what is the best way of releasing pressure? Well, the moon is trine Mercury, and I think that moon trine Mercury might be helpful. It suggests that you are able to talk and say what's on your mind. It might not be the first thing you want to do, but if you're getting annoyed about something, or even if you're just obsessed about something, because you decide that's it, you want to throw everything into it, even if you're just obsessed about something, you don't want to keep it to yourself all day long. And if you can start to talk about it and get someone to listen, and perhaps show someone your passion and your intensity, then you might get a sympathetic hearing, and you might get some feedback, and in a way that could go some way towards releasing the tension. And also, we need to be aware that the moon is making an opposition to Venus. Now, that opposition to Venus may not manifest until tomorrow, but I think you're feeling it to an extent. I mean, we have got the moon in Leo opposition Venus in Aquarius, and there may be a tension here between the pressure on you to do things, perhaps for other people, or because you're obliged to, because that's what society wants. And I suppose sometimes society insists that you travel, that you're in a job, that you interact. I don't think you do it willingly. And with the moon opposition Mars, it could be a little bit tetchy. So if you are getting a lot of attention, or you're surrounded by other people, there's still something tense going on. You're feeling not entirely comfortable, and it's almost like you'd feel that you would fundamentally prefer to be someone else. Sorry, not someone else. I didn't mean that. I mean that fundamentally you'd prefer to be somewhere else. So if you've got that tension and things aren't going as smoothly as they should be going, then you just might get angry from the bottom of your heart, and it just explodes, because there is something a little bit explosive about Taurians today. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about the pressure valve. So if you are not happy about something, I think you need to tell people about it as early as possible. This can be a Taurus problem. Taurus can sit on things and not talk about them, and they just gets angrier and angrier and angrier, and then at some stage there is an explosion, and that's not what we want. So if something isn't to your liking and you feel it needs to be mentioned, don't let it sort of simmer away. Address it. Say what's on your mind. Say what's on your mind as early as possible. And because the earlier you express yourself, the more reasonable you're going to sound. And that might be the best way of dealing with the situation. And, I'm not saying that it has to be a bad day. I'm sort of looking at, I suppose, today from, in a way, the worst possible light. I think that on a sort of a positive note, you're going to be very good at defining your space, looking after your space. And if you're prepared to communicate, I think you can tell people about your priorities, but it's just so important to communicate as early as possible. Don't leave it too late. Don't allow yourself to get angry about anything. Gemini, it's I think a good day for Geminis. I think that you're feeling better. Perhaps you finally realize that Mercury is going direct. Mercury was retrograde up until the weekend, and it went stationary. And it's good that Mercury went stationary, but it perhaps took you a bit of time to get used to this fact. And now, with the moon moving into Leo, you're feeling yourself. Remember, Leo and Gemini are two signs that are fairly sympathetic to one another. And so with the moon in Leo, you feel that you can be yourself, you can do things that you want to do, and most importantly, you can just be a Gemini. Geminis, they like free flow, and the moon is making a trine to Mercury, and so moon trine Mercury is about you being able to tell people what's on your mind and feeling that you can be understood. And that's always important for a Gemini, to feel understood. Sometimes Geminis can be misinterpreted, misunderstood, but not today. And there's certainly no excuse for it. I think that there is a free flow of information, and I think that you're helped by the fact that you're going to be relatively good at understanding things from other people's point of view. You'll be able to see what they want, what their priorities are, and it's not because you're being incredibly sensitive or overly emotional. In a way, you're using your logic, your sort of rationality. But okay, when I talk about logic, I have to be a little careful here, because it's not just logic in terms of working things out. There's also a sense of instant perception here, which has got nothing to do with your emotions. It's the fact that Mercury is in Sagittarius, the moon is making a trine to Sagittarius, a moon is making a trine to Mercury, and so it just may be that things just click together. Suddenly you realize how things are, how things work, and it may be actually a moment of revelation, but I don't mean that in a spiritual sense, really. It's just things suddenly become clear, and it's obvious. And I think you may understand something about other people and what motivates other people in a way that is obvious. You just understand why people behave in the way they do, and it just makes things so much easier. And when you are talking, communicating, just make sure there's always that free flow, because the free flow of information, you communicating, things being told back to you, it just allows you to understand things, and really to understand things very, very well. And in the process, a Gemini, I think you're actually going to be appreciated. People are going to appreciate what you're going to offer. And there's, even something about you, as you present yourself, that is going to be quite appealing, and you will, I think in most cases, actually give quite a good impression. And so don't be too self-conscious. The way you come across, the way you talk is just fine, and people like you, I think, in most cases. We shouldn't forget that Mercury is in mutual reception to Jupiter. Okay, Mercury has been opposition Jupiter. It's kind of still opposition Jupiter, but it's in mutual reception to Jupiter. And we've got the Moon, as I said, Moon making a trine to Mercury. In fact, tomorrow we've got Moon making a sextile to Jupiter. So if there have been disagreements with anyone or incompatibilities, it's actually today and tomorrow's, it's a good time to start to resolve them. And you're helped by the fact that you are someone right now who is very definite, and I think that you're going to be able to communicate with considerable power. And I suppose you could take things too far. We have got Moon conjunct Mars in Leo, so you might embellish things more than you have to, perhaps say too much, and perhaps, I suppose, if you start to drift into sort of sensitive subjects, you might get a negative reaction, but I suppose that's possible. So, Gemini, consider what people want to hear, and don't say something just because. I mean, that actually is a bit of a Gemini trait. Something occurs to you, and you just feel you just got to say it. You've got to say it, and you think it's clever at the time, and you think it's clever to say it, and you think it's clever until the moment you say it, and the moment you say it, you realise that it wasn't clever. So, don't say more than you have to. But overall, Gemini, I think it could be a great day. Cancer, it's a day when, you've got quite a lot of action in Leo. So Leo is the sign following Cancer. And I suppose you have to make a special effort to sort of recast yourself in a slightly different way. And over the last couple of days, the Moon has been going into Cancer, going through Cancer. It's a sign that you were very easy with because it's your sign, and you just naturally understood what was happening, and you didn't really have to make much of an effort. But now things are different. I think that you find yourself having to be more positive, having to kind of make things happen, and also making it clear who you are. I mean, normally you don't have to worry about who you are. People know who you are. You know who you are. There's no need to make a fuss about it. But today you might feel that you do have to make a fuss about it, because if you don't say anything, then you might, I suppose, be ignored, or your opinions might be discounted, or maybe people will take the view you don't care, that you're easy about everything, that it doesn't really matter. But of course it does matter. And I think, with a conjunction between the Moon and Mars in Leo, it's very important that your presence is understood and registered. Now, that might not be a problem. If you feel that people are taking notice of you, paying attention to you, then there's nothing to worry about. But if you feel that things are happening without your knowledge, or without your permission, or you're being taken for granted, or you're not being recognized, then I think you're going to have to make some gentle reminders, and you're going to have to tell people that you exist and that you have opinions, and also that you have a certain pride. And Cancers do have a certain pride, and Cancerians don't like being taken for granted, and you certainly don't want things to reach a point where you just get angry about things. So it's important that your presence is registered throughout the day, and don't be afraid of making noise. Now, Cancer traditionally is supposed to be one of the mute signs. The water signs are mute. Cancer, Pisces and Scorpio. Why are they mute? Because if you think about it, crabs don't make a noise. Fish don't make a noise. And scorpions don't make a noise. And, you know, sometimes, as every Cancer knows, it's just best not to make a noise, just to keep quiet. But you know, today the moon makes a trine to Mercury, and that's a very communicative aspect. It can be noisy if it wants to be, particularly with moon making a conjunction to Mars. So if you want to make a noise, Cancer, don't be afraid of it. In fact, maybe you should be making a noise, because the moon in Leo is actually making a trine to the North Node. And North Node is in Aries, and North Node is sort of encouraging you to make your presence felt. So if you feel that things are passing you by, that you're not being taken seriously enough, you know, talk about it. Tell people about it. Don't be afraid of telling people what they're doing wrong, and make it absolutely clear that you have an opinion. Because, you know, if you don't express your opinion, then the assumption will be that you have no opinion and that you don't care. So make your opinion felt as soon as possible. And, you know, this may especially be the case when it comes to making plans. It does seem that people are making plans. Plans are being made. I suppose it's a kind of time of year where people do make plans, isn't it? I suppose maybe in the run-up to Christmas, and people may make assumptions. They may make plans, and you kind of think, oh, they're making plans, and not really worry about it. And then at a later stage, when the plans are really made, you may find out that you actually don't approve of these plans. These don't fit in with what you want to do. So the moment you hear people making plans or thinking about making plans, make sure that you immediately activate, and that you become part of the planning, part of the decision making. You've certainly got something to contribute. You've certainly got opinions which need to be heard. Leo. We have a conjunction between the moon and Mars in Leo, in your sign, and that conjunction between the moon and Mars is certainly very dynamic, and it's a time when Leos can be difficult to be ignored, and it could be that, you know, you are you're hitting the world running. You're ready for action. Okay, it might happen a little bit later in the day. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, then the moon may not go into Leo until late morning, sort of even around lunchtime. So maybe the first part of the day, the moon will be in Cancer, but yeah, the moon will get to Leo in the end. And so, yes, the moon is in your sign. The moon is, well, it's actually making an opposition to Pluto. Then it makes a conjunction to Mars, and that conjunction between the moon and Mars is very much about you. I think with the moon opposition Pluto, you are aware of other people. You're aware that you're not fully in control, particularly when the moon opposition moon opposition Pluto is exact. You're aware of that, and it's kind of a little bit vague. If you do feel that you're not fully in control, and you were to be asked, why don't you feel you're fully in control, you might not be able to give a particularly convincing answer, but it is still a feeling that you have. But the reality is that there is a Moon-Mars conjunction in Leo, and that Moon-Mars conjunction should very much put you in control. You're the one making things happen, and once you really start tuning into this energy, there could be no stopping you. And also the Moon makes a conjunction to Mars. It also makes a trine to Mercury. So you are very active, and I think that you have lots of ideas. And of course we have got 4 personal planets in fire signs. We've got Sun, Mercury, Mars, Moon in fire signs. So you can really be very much at the center of things. And yes, if you want something to happen, Leo, then I'm fairly confident that you can actually make it happen. And by and large, things can happen on your terms. So, so make the most of the day. If there is a complication, it relates to the fact that the Sun is square Neptune. So the Sun is your ruler, and it is square Neptune. And, it's a day that's very positive. Positive. When I say positive, I mean positive in the sense of being very out there, action orientated. Because we have 4 planets in fire signs. We've also got Venus and Jupiter in air signs. In fact, we've only got of the undiscovered planets, the traditional 7 planets, we've only got Saturn in a negative sign in Pisces. So very positive. And so it's all about action. It's all about moving forward. There's not much reflection here, and that might be a problem with this Sun square Neptune. There may be things happening that you refuse to see. You don't want to know about it. It's all about moving forward. And it's good to move forward, but do a look behind your back a little. There might be something you've missed. Some dynamic, perhaps it's a social dynamic, or it could be a detail. Perhaps it could have a financial nature. Everything's moving forward, but perhaps you'd lost sight of something, of how much something cost, or you perhaps forgotten that someone has a financial interest and you weren't really you were kind of ignoring it. Just maybe something else, just some emotional reality that, or it could be a financial reality, just something you're missing. And so, Leo, it's perhaps a time when it's a time when you just need to make a special effort to be sensitive. And it's not easy. And I certainly don't want to discourage you from being active and dynamic. I think you should be. I think it's a great day. But at the same time, just open your heart just a little. Just try to work out what you're missing, because I think you're missing one thing. And once you feel it, and perhaps you need to also look carefully at other people's reactions. Ask yourself, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? Do they entirely approve of what you're doing? And just be aware of that. And just a little bit of awareness could really make the day perfect. Virgo. It's a day when we have Sun square Neptune. The Sun square Neptune is the main aspect today, you could argue. Sun square Neptune is an aspect I will be talking about in detail at the end of this video. So we have got Sun in Sagittarius, square Neptune in Pisces. And Sagittarius and Pisces are angular signs from your perspective, because Pisces is opposition Virgo. Sagittarius is making a square aspect to Virgo. It always does, by definition. And so there is something that might trip you up, and you kind of know what you want, and you just want to be comfortable, and you also want security for yourself. And I think that has been a theme with these Sagittarius planets. And it's not just the fact we've got Sun in Sagittarius, we've got Mercury in Sagittarius. Okay, the Sun is about to leave Sagittarius. In a couple of days' time it will be the solstice and it will move into Capricorn, but for the moment it is in Sagittarius, and it is square Neptune. And there may be some aspect of the system that you are creating for yourself that is not entirely clarified. And it may be, for example, that another person's behavior trips you up because you hadn't taken it into account. And maybe you'd assumed that everything was in order and that everything was under control, but you'd lost sight of something. And I think one of the reasons for this issue might be the fact that there aren't any planets in Earth signs except for Uranus. And Virgo is an Earth sign, and Virgo really does appreciate grounding. Now, in a few days' time, the Sun will be moving into Capricorn, and I think, of course, Capricorn is an Earth sign, and I think for you that's going to be a bit of a relief. But for the moment, something isn't properly defined, and I think that there is a danger that another person's behavior could trip you up, or just some aspect of a person's personality that you just hadn't fully taken into consideration. And so other people and their behavior, or even their lack of behavior. Maybe you'd assume someone will do something and they promised and they don't do it, and that could mess things up for you. So perhaps in that sense you should be self-contained, and you should consider what could go wrong. Just consider it, just think about it, and just consider how people might have missed things out, might have forgotten things. And don't put yourself in a situation where your harmony and well-being are dependent on another person doing what they've said. Just make allowances for other people's unreliability. Now, the moon does make a trine to Mercury. Also, the Mercury is making a trine to Mars, and so we've got Moon conjunct Mars and Moon trine Mercury. And I think that Moon trine Mercury is helpful, and it allows you to understand what is happening. And so, if you really feel uncertain and you just don't know what's happening, that Moon trine Mercury gives you the opportunity to find out what is going on. There's no reason to live in the middle of a cloud of fog. It's absolutely unnecessary. The knowledge is available to you. However complicated things are, however lost you might feel, you can always get access to the information you need with that Moon trine Mercury. And you can do it in many different ways. That Moon trine Mercury is kind of quite secretive, and you'd be surprised how many channels of information actually exist, and you can find things out without anyone knowing that you're asking questions. You can do it in your own quiet way, and perhaps some of the things bothering you, some of the mysteries that have been sort of preventing you from taking the action you feel you need to take, you can start to resolve the issue. But there's no excuse for living in ignorance today, because one way or another, the information you're looking for is most certainly available. Libra, it's, I don't think, a bad day. I think that you probably feel relatively active. There are things going on. There are things you want to engage in. I don't think there's much of a problem in terms of other people. I think other people are going to be, by and large, fairly accommodating, and I think that you can enjoy other people's company. So I suppose as we move towards Christmas, I suppose depending on the culture in which you live, it's often a time for socializing. People perhaps drop their guard and are perhaps more friendly than usual in sort of Christian cultures. And so it's a time when I think that your social life can prosper. And with the moon is in Leo, it's making a trine to Mercury. So you've got lots of things to talk about. But there's no need to take anything too seriously. Things can happen at a fairly light level. In fact, that's probably the best way to approach things. You don't want anything to sit, because I suppose if things sit, then I don't know, they get a bit stagnant. I suppose in extreme situations they can start to rot, but you need to just keep things moving. Don't feel contained. So don't feel that you have to spend all your time in one place. Try to move from one place to another, from one state of mind to another, from one person to another. I think the more variety you can give yourself, the better. And, there's not much Earth in the sky at the moment. In the sense that the only planet in an Earth sign is Uranus, and that's a generational planet. And so, I know that might sound not very grounded, having no Earth, but if there's no Earth, that means there's nothing to anchor you. And so you can just move from place to place. Things will change. The sun will move into Capricorn. That will make a difference. Capricorn is very much an Earth sign. But in these last couple of days before the solstice, I would not say, Libra, that you need to be tied to any one place. Though, in terms of other people, different people have different moods. And perhaps that's another good reason to keep moving. Some people might be angry. The moon is conjunct Mars. And the moon conjunct Mars may represent another person who is quite dynamic, who perhaps has strong opinions, and who perhaps demands a lot of attention. Maybe too much attention. And, again, that's a good reason to keep moving. Some people want a lot of attention, more attention than usual. It may be people that in the past you've spent a lot of time with, and they demand all of your attention, and that should not be something that you necessarily want to give. Recently we had an aspect between Venus and Mars, which I talked about at length when Venus was opposition Mars, and I was indicating to you when Venus was opposition Mars that there may be some people who are not really to your liking, but people who in some way you don't entirely get on with. But that Venus-Mars opposition is kind of coming back into focus, maybe, with the moon making a conjunction to Mars, because the moon makes a conjunction to Mars and then it moves on to make an opposition to Venus. So that means the moon is square the Venus-Mars midpoint. And so with that aspect, try to identify people who could take up too much of your time, people who you can handle in small doses but not in large doses. And so you should then perhaps make appropriate adjustments to your social life and your social plans. Now, as far as work matters are concerned, if that's relevant, I think you could actually be quite dynamic over the course of the day. And there may actually be a continuum for many Librans between work and socializing. And it may be that if you are working, that there is a social dimension to it, and that there's not a clear boundary between your working life and your social life. At the same time, in terms of your friends and who you meet, there is a chance that you meet people who can be useful. So, for example, if you're looking for new business, if you're looking for a job, or if you're looking for ideas about work, if you're concerned that you maybe don't have a job, other people can be a resource. And it may be with that Moon-Mars conjunction that you might find that someone wants to tell you what to do. And I've said that certain people can be a problem. You want to stay out of them. But some people might just want to give you blunt advice. And sometimes blunt advice might be the right thing. So if someone wants to really tell you what you should be doing, you don't have to do what they say. And especially, again, this is especially about money and work. If someone is giving you advice, you might disagree with them. But I would have said try to hear them out. And as far as close relationships are concerned, I do think that those close to you are quite passionate today. There are things that they want to express. There's nothing ambivalent about them, and that might not be something you can handle. It may be something you really appreciate. So, if you're in a close relationship, it may actually take up a lot of your time, and the emotional energy could be high. Now, that could mean that there's a lot of anger. I suppose that's possible. It could be, I suppose, there's a lot of passion, but don't ignore the emotional dimension if you are getting very close to one particular person. Scorpio, you do feel that you're important. And there's nothing wrong with feeling important. You feel that you've most certainly got something to contribute, and I think that you demand to be taken seriously. I mean, you could say that is, in a way, typical Scorpio behavior. I mean, Scorpio is a serious sign, and we have a conjunction between the Moon and Mars, and so Moon and Mars in Leo, that is about Scorpio really asserting itself. This is me. This is what I want. And I don't think it's a day in which you'll particularly tolerate other people's stupidity or carelessness. You will have high standards. And if anyone falls short of those high standards, you could get really annoyed, and you may actually want to express that annoyance. So, Scorpio, what are you going to do about that? Well, I suppose it depends, doesn't it? I mean, if you're in a situation where people are looking to you for guidance and leadership, then I think that is something you can really do. I think you can really play that role very well. And you can be dynamic, you can be assertive, and there won't be any ambiguity about it. And there'll also be a certain amount of pride there. I don't think, Scorpio, you're going to appreciate being contradicted. And really, that applies to whatever you're doing today. You won't appreciate that. Now, don't be too proud. It's perhaps not necessary. You have to perhaps decide, where is it appropriate to be proud? Where is it appropriate to be quite egotistical? Just because you're egotistical, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with being egotistical. But sometimes it's inappropriate to be too obsessed with getting respect. But if you are in a position of leadership, or you want to assume a position of leadership, I think that you can actually be quite effective up until a point. Obviously, don't get too angry. Just make things clear. So I think that is something you can do, and I do think it is a day that is powerful, though. We can't ignore the fact that the Sun is square Neptune. And with that Sun square Neptune, it seems that not everything is clear. I mean, you'd like things to be clear as a Scorpio can ever want things to be. But with Sun square Neptune, it's possible that money may be an area that you don't fully understand. And one thing, Sun is in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is also often associated with speculation. And one thing you mustn't do, I'm sure you're not going to do it, but it's not a good day for gambling. I mean, gambling can happen at many levels. It's not necessarily just going to a casino, but okay, I perhaps shouldn't say it's not a good day for gambling, but anything which is a gamble, especially if money is involved, needs to be treated with real caution, I would have said, because of that Sun square Neptune. And it may be that you don't know that something is a gamble. You think something is just absolutely normal, absolutely commonplace, it's absolutely the right thing to do, but actually it is a gamble, and you just haven't recognized it. And so have some self-awareness, especially when it comes to money. And I suppose, I mean, gambling, I suppose, can take many levels. I suppose gambling can be about buying someone an expensive Christmas present. That can be gambling. You see something, you're looking for a Christmas present, Sun square Neptune, it's a bit expensive, but sometimes you feel that you've got to spend some money because that's the only way you're going to make someone happy. Or you're going to find the right present. You think they'll like it, but you're not sure. So that's an example of gambling. So gambling can take many forms. As I said, it's not just going to the casino. So if you are spending money or committing to large sums of money, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but just consider the possibility that you haven't understood all of the implications, and that you might have got something wrong. So that is something that you need to bear in mind. But it shouldn't take away from the fact that today is dynamic, and I think it's a day when you really can project your power and project your personality, and I think people will very, very soon understand who you are, what you want, and they'll give you the respect you deserve. Sagittarius, I have been a little bit negative when discussing Sagittarius. Certainly yesterday I think I was a bit negative, but the moon is moving into Leo, and the moon makes a conjunction to Mars in Leo, and more than that, the moon is trining Mercury, and Mercury is in trine to Mars. So I can't be particularly negative with that, can I? I mean, all of that activity in fire signs, and of course Sagittarius is a fire sign, and so I think that moon in Leo is really gonna help you. I think it's going to make you aware of possibilities. Yeah, there are indeed many possibilities, and you don't have to restrict yourself. Perhaps in a recent past you have been restricting yourself, but right now I would have said that was largely unnecessary. So what would you like to do today? And so if there's something you want to do, then by and large you should just go for it. I mean, within reason. And I think that you're going to find that other people are going to be pretty cooperative. I mean, Mercury is in your sign, the moon is trine Mercury, Mercury is trine Mars, so there doesn't seem to be any conflict there. And if you want things to happen, Sagittarius, they can just happen, and you don't have to restrict yourself. You can perhaps do some exploring. So if you're not comfortable with the way things are, or if you feel there could be more, then you can find more. Then you can really, you can expand your horizons, Sagittarius. So don't hold back. But I suppose, I've heard it said with the word but, that someone said, I don't know, some comment saying, if you say but, then you should ignore everything said before the word but. I don't mean like that. I mean, I'm absolutely sincere about what I've said, but the but is, and it relates to Sun square Neptune. Sun in Sagittarius is square Neptune. And that Sun square Neptune is arguably the main aspect of the day. And so Sun is in Sagittarius, Sun is in your sign, but it is square Neptune. And so we have to consider what that might mean. And I do not take back anything I've said so far. I do think it's an exciting day. It's action orientated. You can certainly make things happen. Though this Sun square Neptune is perhaps indicating some of the things you have to be a little bit careful about. And that Neptune in Pisces may indicate that there just may be one area that you haven't properly considered, and it may just be something fairly fundamental that you may have ignored, or it could be some kind of pressure from your home and your family. Now, it may be that today you can avoid that Sun square Neptune if you can avoid your home and your family. Perhaps you should not take your home and family into consideration, because if you spend too much time at home, too much time listening to your family, doing what your family say, trying to take into account your family's needs, then you might get distracted, and your power might at some level just get literally watered down. And I suppose that we think about Neptune as this watery planet, and so something foundational could stop you making the most of everything that is around you. So perhaps you could just be just very active and just ignore things that are happening at the root level. On the other hand, you could say that if you ignore what's happening at the root level, you may be tripping yourself up. You might be dealing with a situation where you've got something that is based on weak foundations. So whatever you're doing, consider the foundations of the matter. On what foundations are you walking? And does it matter? Do you need strong foundations? And maybe in certain situations you just haven't done the preparation, and perhaps all you need to do is just attend to a couple of foundational details, and then you can do whatever you want. So I would ask you to consider this Sun square Neptune. Is it something that you should ignore? It's just a distraction. It's just people trying to stop you having fun, for example. Or is Sun square Neptune something you need to attend to? It might not take long to attend to. Once you have attended it, you'll be feeling more secure. So that perhaps is part of the challenge with that Sun square Neptune. But it could be that me talking about that Sun square Neptune is the Sun square Neptune. I'm making you have to sort of worry about nothing, and it shouldn't take away from the fact that today Sagittarius, because I'm thinking about Jupiter, your ruler, but today Sagittarius, you are someone who can absolutely make things happen, and you are dynamic, and even in a situation where nothing appears to be going on, where no one's enthusiastic, you can change things immediately, almost through the power of your personality. Capricorn. Capricorn, just a reminder that there are no planets in Earth signs unless you count Uranus. And you being a Capricorn is an Earth sign, you might be a little bit concerned about that. And you do like a bit of Earth. You need to be able to relate to the material world. Now, this is a situation that is not going to last for much longer, because the sun is on the verge of moving into your sign. I mean, the sun, noon New York time, is 27:16 Sagittarius. So in less than 3 days' time, it's the solstice, when, of course, the sun goes into Capricorn. Whether it's a kind of a winter solstice or the summer solstice, I suppose, depends on whether you're north or the south of the equator. But because there's no Earth, I think it just may be getting you, particularly now, just before the sun moves into Capricorn, you just may feel that other people just are not particularly grounded, and they're not concerned about how important things are. There are very important things going on, and they're just missing it. They're just missing the key details, and that really is irritating you. And so, the question is, what do you do about it, if anything? Well, I think if you want to, you can actually undermine people. And by that I mean, let's say you've got people who think that everything is fine. They're just going through life, everything is fine, nothing wrong, doesn't matter what's happening, it's all going to be fine. And what you can do, if you want to, you can engage with that, and you can just tell them, look, it's not fine. And you can almost deliberately try to undermine their happiness and complacency. And that might sound like a mean thing to do. It's just before Christmas, everything's happy. But maybe there's a certain obligation there, Capricorn, to sow the seeds of distrust even. You don't want people to be too trusting, do you? People are trusting. They think everything's going to be fine. They believe the authorities are going to look after things. The city council is going to look after things. The government's going to look after things. You know that's not true. And you know that things actually aren't good. You can see that. And so, yeah, that would perhaps be a good way of preparing the ground. And I'm not saying you should do it in all situations, but just do consider that possibility. Capricorn is a serious sign, and this might be a time to sort of exercise your seriousness. And overall, Capricorn, I think today there is actually something quite intense about you. You're not in the mood for trivializing things, and as far as you're concerned, there are serious things to consider. And the whole Christmas spirit, if that's what you're into, or if that's what the people around you are into, doesn't amuse you. I don't think, at least today it doesn't. I don't think you're getting into the spirit of things. I think that is a good thing. There's always got to be someone who is looking at the dark side of things, who is aware that things aren't right. And there is a conjunction between the moon and Mars, and that moon-Mars conjunction, I think at some level, is making you feel angry, and you just feel that things aren't right, and at times you may want to express that anger. And if you do express that anger, there won't be anything trivial about it. It will be kind of done with sort of laser beam precision. It's that kind of anger. Maybe it's the anger one often associates with a Scorpio, but obviously you're not a Scorpio, you're a Capricorn. But if something annoys you, irritates you, and you think people are utterly complacent, then Capricorn, I think now might be the time to sow the seeds. And of course, soon enough, the sun will be moving into Capricorn, and I think that you will then very much be in your element. Aquarius. Aquarius, we have a conjunction between the Moon and Mars in Leo. In other words, it's in your opposite sign, and that Moon-Mars conjunction might be a problem, because the Moon-Mars conjunction may refer to other people, and the Moon-Mars conjunction can be quite a high-energy, rather angry contact, and that may say something about the people you have to interact with today. It may be you're dealing with people who are somewhat sensitive. Maybe they've got fragile egos, and it's easy to upset them. It's easy to say the wrong thing. So I think that you do need a certain amount of sort of sensitivity and appreciation. And this is, especially the case if you're planning on saying anything dramatic or doing anything. People could be offended very easily, and that might mean that you just have to be on best behavior, or perhaps you don't care. So if you want to offend people, if you want to cause trouble, then I suppose now is a great day to do it. It won't take much, and you've certainly got a lot to say. And once you say things, and you're not going to want to spend too much time changing your words to fit in with other people's sensitivities. You're going to want to say it as it is, and so when you say it as it is, naturally you're going to get a response. So you will get a response, but yeah, it's just so easy to offend people today. I think, well, certainly much easier than usual. So that is one way of looking at today, especially in terms of relationships. So the important people in your life, if you don't want to offend them, then perhaps you need to be on best behavior. But we could see the Moon-Mars conjunction in a different way. It's possible, Aquarius, that you are being today a little bit lethargic. You could be doing things, but you're not doing things. And, you perhaps feel that now is a time when you can be winding down. In which case, the impulse for action may come from outside. There may be pressure on you to maybe get your act together, to make things happen. And I mean, I suppose you could spend the entire day alone with your phone turned off. I suppose you could do that, but by and large, there is pressure, and I think that people are going to want you to do more than you're actually doing. I mean, okay, if you are leading a super active life anyway, then of course that doesn't apply. But if you're not doing enough, I think it will become clear what you should be doing when you actually consider other people's response to you. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way. I mean, it can be quite inspiring. Sometimes it's difficult to know what to do. We have ideas about what we want to do, but do we actually know what we want to do? Are we actually able to make things happen? Possibly not, particularly if we're an Aquarian on Wednesday, December the 18th. So perhaps you should see other people as being not just a resource, but something to spur you into action. And if people make suggestions, don't be dismissive. Have you got a better idea? And if you haven't got a better idea, then maybe you should follow people's suggestions. You might not like following people's suggestions. I mean, it's always nice to be in control, to be nice to be the decision maker, but you can't always be the decision maker. And if someone's got a good idea and you haven't got a better idea, then I would just suggest that you just follow it through. And by being perhaps a follower rather than a leader, you might actually be doing the right thing. And your flexibility and your ability to listen as well as to talk could be appreciated. And so if you give other people a chance to be themselves, to be dynamic, then it's not just that you'll be showing people your appreciation, but in fact you could be helping yourself. So I do think today could be about other people, and other people could be a problem, but they could also be a big opportunity. Pisces, the main aspect today is a square between the Sun and Neptune. And in many respects, for many people, the Sun square Neptune could be a problem. But I think that for you, it should be okay. I mean, I think I briefly mentioned Sun square Neptune yesterday, and so I want to talk about Sun square Neptune again. And so what's happening is that you have got Neptune moving through your sign, through the very end of your sign. Of course, next year, Neptune moves into Aries. I think it goes back into Pisces, so it takes a couple of years before Neptune really settles in Aries. So Neptune is at the end of your sign, and the Sun is making a square to Neptune. And this Sun square Neptune, I think, is very much about you. And Neptune is a planet that you feel relatively comfortable with, and I think that's because Neptune has an association with Pisces. Neptune does not rule Pisces, but it has an association with Pisces, I think, and it has a certain sympathy with Pisces. So the Neptune energy is not entirely alien to you. And so with this Sun square Neptune, it perhaps relates to where you want to go. And your ideas about where you want to go may be in a state of flux, and on one hand you're not sure where you're going and why you're doing something, but at the same time you have this feeling that it's the right thing to do. And it does mean that you should not be focusing on fixed goals. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. You know how it is. You're supposed to have a plan. You're supposed to do this, this, and this. But Sun square Neptune is not about fixed goals. It's about having a set of plans that are constantly changing, that are constantly adjusting to changing circumstances. And Sun and Neptune, Sun in Sagittarius, Neptune in Pisces, Sagittarius and Pisces are both mutable signs, moving from one thing to another, going with the tide. Going with the tide is such an important concept for Pisces. So you can have a sort of a flexible set of plans over the course of the day, constantly changing. You don't know what you're going to be doing necessarily from even from sort of 1 hour to the next, but you are making progress. Other people might not see the progress, but you are making progress. You are moving towards the end result, and I think that you are doing it very well and very effectively. And it just may be that other people are just very inflexible. They can't see things. They're just totally focused on the positive. The positive represents things which are perhaps definite, clear, and you're able to focus on other things, the things that other people miss, maybe the sort of emotional realities going on. And that's because Neptune can very much become part of you, part of your reality. So I do think that today you're working on a different level to other people, and perhaps you're working on submarine level. That might be one way of looking at it, but you are understanding things, and you're able to change as the tide changes. And I think that you could end the day getting much further than you'd imagined was possible. And it's just so important not to have fixed ideas and certainly not to get worked up by change. And I know that there's a conjunction between Moon and Mars today, and that Moon-Mars conjunction may make you very precious about some of your plans and some of the things you want to do, but don't be precious. I mean, I understand that you do need a certain level of organization, but the Sun-Neptune square is sort of inviting you to look at things in a different way, not to be restricted. And so in your own silent Piscean way, you can actually give yourself a lot of freedom, and you can get to places that which really are very surprising. Now, there is a trine between Moon and Mercury today, which I suppose I should say something about. The Moon-Mercury trine, I mean, it's a trine that I think works in your favour, and in spite of the fact that you should be sort of going all over the place, you're able to tell people what you're doing. I think there's no problem discussing what you're doing or giving yourself good account. I think it's actually that you come over as someone who knows what they're doing and who has some conscious plan, even though that you're working on a completely different level. But I think in terms of giving an account of yourself, I don't think that's going to be a problem. And so if you're asked why you're doing what you're doing, don't think about it. Just say it. Just come up with something, and your words will, I think, sound very convincing. And now it's time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 21, which is biting through. And this is a hexagram I think we got quite recently. And biting through is a hexagram which is about punishment. And it's about dealing with people who are not behaving well. And this may reflect the fact that the moon is conjunct Mars. And I do kind of associate moon conjunct Mars with someone getting annoyed, and there's a certain sense of anger and lecturing with moon conjunct Mars, because people get offended and people want to tell each other that they've been behaving badly, and that may be the moon conjunct Mars. But biting through, is asking the question, what do you do when someone is not behaving right? And we've got two moving lines here, the fifth and the sixth line moves. So the fifth line moves, and the fifth line is saying that it is a dangerous situation. How do you deal with people who are not behaving as they should, who are perhaps not respecting us? And in the first instance, the advice is, well, you have to be lenient. You can't be too strict, can you? But at the same time, it is a dangerous situation. It is difficult to change people. People do not change easily. And in fact, it may be impossible to change someone. And that is perhaps a problem with biting through. And I suppose biting through is asking us to find the good in other people. That's biting through. The idea that you've got a leather exterior, but deep down there is gold. And so we have to find that gold in other people. At least we should be striving to find that gold in other people. But we can't be complacent, and we can't assume that other people can be trusted. And just a reminder, we're biting through, this might reflect us as well. It might be our own transgressions. Maybe we have to be tough with ourselves, but we can't be too tough with ourselves. I mean, that can be a problem. We can be making mistakes, and we can do something wrong, and we know we've made mistakes, and we can be really harsh on ourselves when we mess something up, and we can give ourselves that sort of private sort of lecture, this must never happen again. Of course, it always does happen again, but we perhaps have to be a little lenient on ourselves if we have made mistakes, and perhaps we need to look at who we are in the best possible light and try to understand the good parts of who we are, not just go for self-recrimination just for the sake of it. Now, the top line moves as well, and the top line in I Ching it's often a difficult line, and I think in this case it is, and it refers to someone who just cannot be won't be told. They will not listen, and that may be the end result. So if you're annoyed with someone at the moment and you're trying to get through to them, in the end it may be impossible to get through to them, and because they're so stubborn, they're so set in their ways. And there is a contradiction here, because this hexagram is about punishment, and the symbol here in this top line is someone who is bound up in something, like the stocks. They're tied up in something, and something is put over their head, and this is some kind of punishment. But it's put over their head in such a way that their ears are covered. And so if someone's ears are covered as part of the punishment, then they can't listen to what you're saying. So with the top line, it's maybe about saying something where you're really angry, and you're so angry that the other person can't listen. I don't know. It's sort of reminds me of, as a child, doing something, when I'm doing something really bad, not just bad, doing something really bad. And I have a teacher screaming at me, someone's really, an authority figure as a child screaming at me. And when someone is screaming at me, I remember what you think when someone is screaming at you. And when someone is screaming at you, you start to feel a certain sense of self-justification, and you close down, and you actually stop listening, and it almost justifies your action because someone is screaming at you. And I suppose, talking about screaming at people, we've got Moon conjunct Mars in Leo, and so getting too angry with someone, you're closing someone's ears. They're not listening, and so anger can be a real problem. And so I don't know. Don't scream at yourself, of course, because you might stop listening to yourself, and don't scream at other people. And if you feel that someone is really doing something wrong, it needs to be taken to task, then you have to be careful how you express yourself, because if you get too annoyed, you're making too much noise. The other person's just not going to listen. And so, there is a bit of a difficult situation there in the end. Now, I've got two moving lines. That does mean that we move, and we move to a much calmer hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram 17, which is following. And so I think that if you compare the two hexagrams, that first hexagram biting through is about the struggle for authority, the struggle to maintain our authority perhaps in the face of a little bit of a disintegration of people perhaps disobeying us, or perhaps we disobeying ourselves. That's what we can do. It's that struggle for authority, and then it moves to following. And following is also about authority, because it's about who's leading, who's following. And it perhaps is saying that we can take the initiative, following, and it's quite possible that people will follow us. But then the question is, how do you get people to follow you? Well, in order to if you want a following, you have to listen to your followers. If you want people to take you seriously, you need to listen. And so, going back to the previous hexagram, the top line of that previous hexagram, that Moon conjunct Mars is not about listening. It's about just telling someone how angry you are, just getting annoyed. There's no listening there. You're just getting annoyed. You might be furious, but you're not listening. And so your fury is being ignored. And so with this hexagram, following is just a reminder that if you want to make an impression, you have to listen. And you have to work with the psychological material in front of you. If you don't work with another person's psychology, you're not going to make any impression. But with this hexagram following, I do think that is something that you can do. So, or, as I say, with following, if you want to be a leader, you first have to be a follower. And part of following is about following the train, perhaps, of another person's psychology and fitting the message so that it is acceptable. Because unacceptable messages will never be followed. They will always be ignored. And now I'm going to switch to the aspect between the Sun and Neptune, which is exact today. So if we look at what's happening today astrologically, going back to the chart. So the Sun is in Sagittarius, and it's making a square to Neptune. So there's the Sun at 27:16 Sagittarius. There's Neptune at 27. Well, at noon New York time, it's 27:10 Pisces. And so, with Sun square Neptune, I mean, there are different ways it can manifest. I can remember someone talking about it in terms of heart problems. I mean, I remember when I was learning astrology, we were looking at this chart of someone who had heart surgery, and they had Sun square Neptune. And I think the teacher was pointing out the connection between Sun square Neptune and heart surgery. I mean, that doesn't sound obvious, does it? But the Sun is the heart, so you could say that Sun square Neptune, that would be a manifestation of Sun square Neptune. I mean, I'm not saying that's what Sun square Neptune is always going to be about, or indeed is going to be about. But you just need to work with the symbolism and who someone is and their life history. But the Sun represents us, I suppose, particularly in a male chart. I mean, I think that in a female chart, the Sun may represent the man in a woman's life. It could be father, son, a husband, boyfriend, whatever the man or woman is attracting. But the Sun is still represents selfhood, regardless of our gender. And so, when it is square Neptune, you could say that it is under a fair amount of pressure. It's not clear. There's something kind of undermining it. There could be a situation where we are undermined, or we might be encouraged to do things which undermine us. And Neptune can, in certain situations, be a little bit perverse, and getting interested in things that we should not be interested in. I suppose Neptune is a planet that's often connected with drugs and alcohol. And so you could understand the symbolism for someone having Sun square Neptune getting involved with drugs or alcohol or perhaps crime or things they shouldn't be involved with. Though I suppose you could be completely positive about it and say, well, Neptune is about oil. So someone with Sun square Neptune, the challenges of Sun square Neptune, well, they might be attracted to the oil industry. Or rather than be a drug user, they might want to work for a drug company. So that is another way in which Sun square Neptune is. And I suppose if you're looking at the chart of Sun square of someone who has Sun square Neptune, or perhaps you have Sun square Neptune, you have to try to be positive about it. It's something one is trying to achieve, Sun square Neptune. It's something one is trying to integrate into oneself. And I suppose Sun square Neptune, one of course also thinks about spirituality, and one might want to transcend. One wants to break down the barriers and be part of something larger than oneself. And so religion might be a way of doing it, and perhaps putting more energy into one's spirituality. And I suppose that's the connection between sort of drugs and religion. I mean, with drugs, you're just trying to become part of the whole. Maybe Sun square Neptune, you can think of the opium pipe and sort of dissolving into something, and of course obviously self-destructive, but still one wants to dissolve into something and not worry about anything, because one is just part of the whole, and one's own personal problems have just gone. They've disintegrated into something wider than ourselves. And I suppose that could be political as well. I mean, I suppose you might, with Sun square Neptune, you might get caught up in some kind of ideology. And so those are ways in which Sun square Neptune might work. So what I want to do is I want to first look at examples of people who do have Sun square Neptune in their horoscopes, and then I want to look at some Sun square Neptune events. Some of these people I will know more about than others, and maybe you'll know more about them than me. But let's start off with some politicians who have got Sun square Neptune, and I'll start with Gretchen Whitmer. So Gretchen Whitmer, she is the governor of Michigan, and she was, I suppose, in that sort of brief moment of chaos when Biden was standing down, she was considered a possible candidate to take over the Democratic nomination. So there's her sun at 0 degrees Virgo, and her Neptune at 0 degrees Pisces. Sun in Virgo. She's born pretty close to the Independence Day of Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine has its sun, I think it's 0 degrees 50 something Virgo. I think she's a passionate advocate of the Ukrainian cause. So that says something about her. And yeah, she's got an exact Sun-Neptune square. So how is that working out? I don't know much about her. In fact, that Sun-Neptune square is opposition Saturn. So Saturn is involved in that. So when you're looking at an aspect between Sun and Neptune, you've also got to look at other planets that are linked with it. And so the Saturn has an involvement there. So you could say with Sun-Neptune, okay, Sun-Neptune may say something about the men in her life. That's possible. I don't know anything about her personal life. And things could be, for her, she might get attracted to particular causes. And, I'm thinking with that Sun square Neptune, she made this huge mistake over the campaign, which I don't think was politically very clever, and where there was this film of her giving some feminist vlogger or something, was it a Dorito or something, as if she was giving her the host and it was considered to be very sacrilegious. I mean, it seemed to me, I saw the video, it just seemed stupid, but what was she trying to do? She seemed to be appealing to the sort of progressive voters. In other words, she was trying to appeal to people who were going to vote Democrat anyway. But that seemed to be a mistake, and it was a mistake regarding religion. Neptune in Sagittarius, Sun square Neptune, which did upset maybe some Catholic voters. Of course, in the Electoral College, Michigan went to Trump. So those are some thoughts about it. But I don't really know a great deal about Gretchen Whitmer, so maybe if you're in Michigan, you might have some ideas about how that Sun-Neptune square might be working. So another politician or former politician who has Sun square Neptune is Mark Rutte. So Mark Rutte used to be Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and he is now, I believe, he's Secretary General of NATO. And there is his Sun in Aquarius, and it is square Neptune. So I suppose if you're a politician with Sun square Neptune might make you idealistic. That you might actually seriously think that by getting involved in politics, you're going to make things better for people. I mean, that is ridiculous. I mean, politicians, whoever they are, do not make things better. I mean, it's an incredible arrogance to think that anyone could make things better for their country by going into politics. I mean, some people are like that, I suppose. But with Sun square Neptune, there is perhaps a certain sense of delusion there. As Secretary General of NATO, he's just said that NATO countries should perhaps be spending less money on welfare and more money on defence, because Mark Rutte is, one of these neocons. He's obsessed with pursuing NATO's war in Ukraine, and so with that Sun square Neptune, there might be a sort of a deluded quality to it, and Sun square Neptune might be about his attitudes to what is possible. And so this is a man who is in charge of NATO. He's got Sun square Neptune, so he's probably got completely unrealistic ideas about what NATO can achieve. Now, Sun square Neptune can be manipulative, it can be quite clever, and the former Prime Minister of France, Michel Barnier, I haven't really been following French politics recently, but he was briefly French Prime Minister, appointed by Mitterrand. He was looking to kind of get some agreement in the French Parliament. He failed. Now they've got someone else. I need to look at that someone else. But here is Michel Barnier's chart, and he has got Sun in Capricorn square Neptune in Libra. Now, his Sun is in the 7th house, and his Neptune is in the 7th Neptune's in the 4th, 5th house. But he dealt with the Brexit negotiations with the UN as Britain was leaving the European Union, and apparently he was a very effective negotiator. And if you have Sun in the 7th house square Neptune, maybe that actually makes you an effective negotiator, because if you've got the Sun in the 7th, that perhaps allows you to really understand other people's motivations and being able to manipulate people and maybe deceive people as well. And so maybe in his case, the Sun square Neptune worked quite well, at least up until a point. But when he became Prime Minister of France, I suppose it was an impossible task. Even the very skilled Michel Barnier with his Sun square Neptune, he couldn't deal with this impossible task. I don't think that's really a reflection on him or even on his Sun square Neptune. But perhaps Sun square Neptune, he was idealistic. He thought maybe he'd give it a go. That's Sun square Neptune. There's a bit of hope there. So that is perhaps how it might work. And then, well, not really a politician. Julius Streicher. So Julius Streicher, I do occasionally look at his chart. So he was a Nazi. He he wasn't a very effective Nazi up until a point. I mean, he was famous for making his anti-Semitic speeches, and he was a kind of a journalist. I think he was editor of Der Stürmer, which was one sort of a Nazi Party newspaper. But during the Second World War, he just faded away, and he has Sun square Neptune. So there is his Sun, and he's got Sun in Aquarius, square Neptune in Pisces. Sorry, Neptune in Taurus. So, and he's got Neptune rising. So you could see Sun square Neptune in terms of wanting to dissolve into an ideology. I mean, he discovers Nazism, and Nazism's great, and he just follows it completely. Sun square Neptune, I suppose, can be about propaganda and manipulation. I mean, he's got Sun conjunct Mars, so he's got Mars square Neptune as well. So he just gets into the whole thing, the whole Nazi thing. Sun square Neptune, but there is a certain sense of self-delusion, and I think he lost favour pretty quick at the beginning of the First World War. He didn't really do much, and then I think he was into pornography, and at the end, during the war, and he was just fairly, I suppose you could say, that is the perversity of Neptune, and he just sort of faded away. So that's how perhaps we can see how Sun square Neptune worked in the end. And of course, at the Nuremberg trials, he was hanged. Again, he messed up the Nuremberg trials as well. I think if he had been contrite, he might have saved his neck, but he kept on being obnoxious and pushing the Nazi line, because during the war he didn't do anything. I mean, in terms of his crimes were really about what he said. I mean, he almost had in America, he might almost have had a First Amendment defense there, because it was just his speeches he was hanged for. I don't think he was hanged for anything else. And I suppose if he'd been contrite and if he'd perhaps cooperated more with the court, he could have saved his neck. But no, he didn't do it. And anyway, apparently he was a Nazi with the lowest IQ. He had an IQ of 106 of all the Nazis. He had the lowest. But anyway, that's perhaps an example of Sun square Neptune. And Sun square Neptune can be connected with drugs, people who have drug problems. And Matthew Perry, again, someone I don't know anything about, but apparently he was he in Friends, and I think he was taking ketamine, and he had drug issues which were completely wrecking his health. And so there you have his Sun at 26 Leo and Neptune at 25 Scorpio. Now, Sun square Neptune can to an extent be the glamour and the bright lights. And so I suppose if you want to be an actor, famous actor, someone who everyone looks to, I suppose, in Friends. Sun square Neptune, I've never watched Friends in my life, by the way, so I don't really know anything about it. But he had Sun square Neptune, so it might have helped him in his acting career, because Neptune is some things that are unreal. The film is unreal, but so that could be Sun square Neptune, a nice sun in Leo in its own sign in the first house, even though he's got true Black Moon Lilith rising. But Neptune at some stage can switch and become a sort of drug issue, and so that can be how Sun square Neptune can work, and it can represent drug problems. Now, as far as events are concerned, now I've tried to keep these Sun Neptune squares close. So all these Sun square Neptunes I've been looking at are within 3-degree orb, but I do want to look at one chart which has got Sun square Neptune, but is not an exact. It is not an exact Sun square Neptune. Is given the fact that Matthew Perry was, I think, partially undone by ketamine. So I don't know what kind of dose he was taking, but he was taking ketamine, and the first human trial with ketamine took place on August the 3rd, 1964. So I'm now talking about events, and I don't know what time. I think they used prisoners as as their subjects. And I think this was quite an effective trial. They did find that ketamine could work. So I think this was done in Jackson, Michigan, where I think there is a prison. And so at the time of this trial, we had the Sun in Leo, Sun in Leo square Neptune. So the Sun was applying to a square of Neptune. So it's kind of interesting that, this association between Sun square Neptune and ketamine, and a successful trial with a drug. And of course, Matthew Perry also had Sun square Neptune. So maybe, I don't know, maybe if you've got Sun square Neptune, maybe you may be attracted to ketamine, because the Sun square Neptune has this connection with ketamine. Now, there are a few other events. The fall of the Bastille took place when the Sun was square Neptune. So this was with the final fall of the Bastille. The Sun was at 22 Cancer, and Neptune was maybe on the midheaven. I've got 5:30 for the final moment that the Bastille surrendered. So I suppose Sun square Neptune, you could say that Sun square Neptune is about the dissolving of something. So you have the Bastille, the Bastille in Paris was not a fort. It was a symbolic fortress. I don't think there was anyone in it there were a few people in it, but it wasn't like the seat of government or anything, but it just became a symbol. And so I suppose Sun square Neptune, you can think of the mob attacking this symbol, and then Sun square Neptune represents the dissolution of something, the dissolution of the Bastille, but it's also the dissolution of the whole ancien regime of the monarchy in France. Although the monarchy did continue for a few years in France, it wasn't the absolute end of the monarchy, July the 14th, 1789. Now that Sun square Neptune is also, of course, linked to the French horoscope, because you could say that the fall of the Bastille is the French horoscope. And so maybe that says something about France, because what you're seeing here could be France. And so the Sun square Neptune, I don't want to categorize a whole country on the basis of Sun square Neptune. I suppose, what do you associate France with? I don't know. I don't want to stereotype France, so I'm not going to say anything about that Sun square Neptune here, because I think just to look at that Sun square Neptune in isolation. But I suppose it could say something about France's ideas about itself, and I suppose that Sun square Neptune, France was started with a revolutionary ideology, and I suppose we can see how that ideology has changed into nationalism, and how that nationalism is still sort of alive and well in France. And another event I want to look at, which kind of relates to a horoscope. I know I'm talking about events here, but I just wanted to quickly look at a person who was someone who was born on Sun square Neptune and died on Sun square Neptune. Was an assassin. And he was Slovak. He assassinated Heydrich in 1942, I think. And so he's got Sun. So he was parachuted into the former Czechoslovakia, and he sort of disappeared. Him and his co-assassin, and he has got Sun square Neptune. So you can see he's got Sun square his Neptune Sun in Aries, square Neptune in Cancer, and so that could be the sign of an assassin, someone doing things in secret and spending a long time in German-occupied Czechoslovakia, working out what needs to be done, and so. That's Sun square Neptune, and then he attempted to kill Heydrich, him and his co-assassin Kubiš was his name, in Prague, and Gabčík tried to shoot Heydrich, but the machine gun jammed, and then Kubiš threw a bomb at Heydrich, and it blew up, and Friedrich died of a blood infection, so in sometime later. So it wasn't eventually a successful assassination. But so he was born on a Sun square Neptune, and he died on a Sun square Neptune as well. So here is the day he died. So you can see him and Kubish were held up in the basement of a church in Prague, in a Cyril and Methodius church in Prague, and there's the Sun square Neptune at the time of his death. So you could say that here is a man who had Sun square Neptune, and so he's going to be very sensitive to the Sun square Neptune cycle. And so with Sun square Neptune, the church was surrounded by the Germans, and I think they were pumping water into the basement of this church to get them out. And that kind of really fits Sun square Neptune, and I think in the end they both committed suicide, I think. So that I would have said was a Sun square Neptune event. And Sun square Neptune, we talked about how the fall of the Bastille was related to the Sun, relates to Sun square Neptune, how the Sun was square Neptune at the time of the fall of the Bastille. And Louis XVI, the French king, was executed on January 21st, 1793. And you can see that the Sun was exactly square Neptune. In fact, Sun was square Neptune on the day that Louis XVI was executed. So this might mean that France is vulnerable to the Sun-Neptune cycle, and perhaps, today we've got Sun square Neptune, so it'd be interesting to see what's happening in France at the moment, and whether we get some kind of Sun square Neptune event. And Neptune is connected with the sea, and sort of top right we've got a picture of the Titanic, and the Titanic embarked from Southampton on its final voyage on April the 10th, 1912, and you can see that the Sun was at 20 Aries and Neptune was at 21 Cancer. So if you've got a Titanic and you're embarking on a voyage with Sun square Neptune, do you want to be a passenger on a ship with Sun square Neptune as in the chart of that voyage? Possibly not. And so and look at the moon. The moon is kind of void of course. So it wasn't a great time to start a journey with Sun square Neptune. And so the Sun square Neptune became exact, and so by the time of the sinking of the Titanic a few days later, there's the Sun at 24 Aries and Neptune is at 21 Cancer. So we can say that the Titanic sank when there was Sun square Neptune, and this Titanic has become an obsession, hasn't it? People have wanted to explore the wreck of the Titanic, and in 2023, this Ocean Gate submarine, which was made of, what was it made of? It wasn't fully made of titanium. It was made of some carbon fiber shell, and of course it cracked, and these people were killed in it. And so the Ocean Gate submarine, when it lost contact with the surface, here's a chart for when it went down, or I'm not sure whether this is when it down or when it sank. I think this is the beginning of the journey. So when that submarine went, Sun was square Neptune. I mean, I think I've got the time right. If I've got the time right, we've got Sun conjunct the midheaven and Neptune square the descendant. And so would you really go down in that submarine with Sun on the midheaven, Neptune on the descendant, even if they weren't on the angles, Sun square Neptune? So given the fact that the Sun square Neptune was linked with the Titanic sinking anyway, and you go down in a submarine to explore the Titanic, at a time when the Sun is square Neptune. Well, kind of what do you expect? And of course, the hull collapsed, I don't know, however many miles under the surface, a couple of miles under the surface. And so that is Sun square Neptune. I suppose, as far as what was happening in that submarine, I suppose the occupants of that submarine were crushed in an instant, and I suppose they became part of the ocean. I suppose that was, in a way, a somewhat Neptunian experience. And with that, I will close this video. There were a few more Sun square Neptune charts I wanted to look at, but I think I'm running out of time. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.